Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mindful Metal Jacket. You're back. I'm back. Thank you for coming back or for trying it out for the first time. Like anal. I appreciate you listening. Glad you're here. Hope you're doing well. Are you doing well? It's a good thing to ask yourself, right? I mean, I'm asking you, but I'm not there, and most likely you don't really know me. So my asking you is like you asking yourself, Are you doing okay? Are the people around you doing okay? That's an important distinction. Sometimes you feel good, but you're making everyone else miserable, or vice versa. I hope you're doing well, and I appreciate you being here. I'm excited about today's episode. I had a great conversation that I hope you enjoy. And everyone keeps asking for a list of all the books that are mentioned. I should start that or put that somewhere. Maybe I'll post it on Instagram, but some of them I'll just tell you about right now or recall. One that Shafi Hossein and I were talking about is A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine. And that's all about Stoicism, which we talked about a bunch in that episode. A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine. And here's a book I haven't really mentioned on the podcast that I forgot about that I love. Well, not that I forgot about it, just hasn't been in the front of my mind. But The Compassionate Life by a guy named Mark Ian Barash, Biarasch. It's called The Compassionate Life, Walking the Path of Kindness. And that's a book I read a long time ago. And I pulled a quote from there that you'll hear in a moment. But it's one of my favorite books. I found it in a used bookstore in Austin, or in a bookstore. I bought a used copy of it, I think. I think it was in Austin. Maybe it was somewhere else. But I bought it used, and it's great. It's got a little sneaker with a flower coming out of it on the front cover, but it's a terrific book, and I highly recommend that book. And a book I've mentioned a bunch on here is The Antidote by Oliver Berkman. That's one of my favorite books. The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts is another book I've mentioned on here that I love. That was like one of the first books that got me into all the Buddhism stuff. It's terrific. Currently, I'm reading The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac. And what's the Jack Kornfield one? Also has wisdom in the title. God, I can't think of it. It's like changed my life, that goddamn book. Oh, why can't I think of it? I'm confusing it with The Compassionate Life because both are similar. The Wise Heart. Ooh, so glad I thought of that. The Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield is one of my favorite books ever. So those will all help you. And then any Thich Nhat Hanh book, of course, Happiness, Peace of Mind. There's a lot. They're all pretty similar. And may I also recommend a book that admittedly I have not read, but I plan to. It's a book by today's guest, Adam Cayton-Holland, called Tragedy Plus Time. You can get that. And my friend Adam Cayton-Holland, who's today's guest, he wrote that book. And it's a book I want to read and have been wanting to read and just have not got around to do it yet. But I will, and I think you'll be very interested in it after hearing this episode. Adam is a comic who lives in Denver, and he's fantastic. He has an album coming out, a new album coming out August 3rd, which I was supposed to bank this episode and then release it after the album had been out, but scheduling didn't allow me to do that, so I kind of screwed up. So I'm just asking you and tasking you with remembering that his album is coming out on August 3rd. It's called Semblance of Normalcy. Monday, August 3rd, it'll be out. And he's got a couple other albums, too, that are great. You can go check them out. They're all available streaming. One's called I Don't Know If I'm Happy, and another one's called Performs His Signature Bits. And they're all on Apple Music and stuff. Adam's a great comic, really, really funny. And we actually don't know each other that well. We spent a little time together when I was in Denver doing shows with Ari, big group hang, and then we spent some time together in Dublin. We were both at the Dublin Comedy Festival together, and I'm an admirer of his work, and I really like him. I like seeing him, and I was happy to have him on the podcast. It's a really great conversation. We talk all about our anxieties and having a kid, and the anxiety of having a kid, and he's dealt with some tragedy in his life, which he was kind enough to talk about. So we talk about grievance and therapy and specific kinds of therapy and PTSD and a bunch of other good stuff. And I think we had some laughs, and it was a really nice conversation. And I just screwed up with the scheduling. So instead of saying, go get his album right now, go stream his album right now, I'm going to say, go get it, go stream it on Monday, August 3rd, Semblance of Normalcy by Adam Cayton-Holland. And check him out on Instagram and Twitter. Very, very funny guy. And he also has a podcast called The Grawlix Saves The World. Grawlix is Grawlix. You've probably heard of them before. They had a TV show for a while, and they're great, and he's great, and I'm rambling now, but I hope you enjoy this conversation. I hope that you're doing well, and I hope that you check out some of these books because they've been really, really helpful for me. And I've been talking a lot lately about the Waking Up app by Sam Harris, which I also highly recommend. It's been extremely helpful to me. So I appreciate listening to the show. I appreciate all the kind words, and the reviews are so nice. And if you want to do that, leave a review. It's very helpful. And as always, the most helpful thing you can do is to tell some people about it. Tell some friends, tweet it, Instagram it, and say, hey, this podcast is great. Spread the word and spread the love. Be nice to each other, right? I mean, we're only here for a brief time. Might as well be nice. Anyways, here's a nice quote that I enjoyed that I pulled out of this book, The Compassionate Life, which I highly recommend. And it goes a little something like this. If one completes the journey to one's own heart, one will find oneself in the heart of everyone else. That's the opening quote to Chapter 1 of The Compassionate Life, Walking the Path of Kindness by Mark Ian Borash. I hope I'm saying his name right. And I hope you're well, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with myself and my friend Adam Cayton-Holland. Bye. All right, we're live. It's happening. This is it.
Man, the pressure.
Is this all right? We did very little prep. I hope it's all right.
I think it's all right. We're both pros. We both like each other. I say we just go for it.
All right, sweet. We're in. Well, thanks for doing it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
or whatever you say. Thanks for being had.
Yes, always.
It's fun. We're going to talk about anxiety. I get anxious every time I do this podcast, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is stupid. I shouldn't do this. It's making me unhappy.
Yeah, well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think you're smart to do like the intros later, because that alleviates some of the pressure. Because if you just had to right now spin a killer intro, it'd be too much to handle. You'd quit the podcast.
It's too much. It's brutal. And here's what happens. It's like the classic thing with everything that we get anxious about is this thing of like, I don't know how we're going to talk for an hour. That's insane. It's going to be crazy. But I was just doing this thing. I have all these tools now with anxiety. But part of it is just like, I'm sitting here being like, what are you afraid of? When have you ever done any podcast ever where we just stopped and we're like, okay, we're out of things to say. It's over now.
That's it. Normally you clock in at an hour or so, but this is going to be an 18-minute cast, and that's a micro episode.
Yeah, it's never happened. And the other thing I'm doing, I don't know. I'd like to get into this, but are you a meditator at all? Have you gotten into meditation at all?
Not really. But I'm not trying to shamelessly plug, but my friends and I do a podcast where we try to improve ourselves, and it's like a different challenge every week. And so one of the challenges recently was meditating for a week, just give it a try. And I really enjoyed it, but I'm terrible at it. It's no good. Like I had to Google how do you meditate? Like, that's how I started doing it. But I want to do it more. I did it for 7 days in a row, and I can see the benefits for sure.
Well, I think that's the thing about meditation is you got to, first of all, I think you understand that like you're not just going to be like great at it. And I think there's not even a such thing as great at it.
Right.
It's just sort of like, it's not like, gymnastics.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what I thought, you got to clear your head and you have to try to not think. And then all these stray thoughts would come in and I'd be mad at myself for not even being able to shut my brain off. But then I learned over the course of the week, that's okay. Just take in those thoughts, let them come in and out. And that's part of the process.
Yeah. So that's like basically the process. And that's like the most typical thing. I'm talking like I'm a meditation expert. I'm not, but I think that's the most typical reaction is like, I can't manage to shut down these thoughts, but that's not even like a possibility. That's the brain's job is to think thoughts. Right.
It reminded me of back in the day, I took classes at Second City. Before I did stand-up comedy, I took like an improv class and a sketch writing class. And one of the assignments was like, go do free writing before you even come to class. Go sit for an hour and just write every thought that comes into your head. And as a way to sort of get the creative juices flowing. And it reminded me of that because it was very just stream of consciousness, get it all out. And I found it helped creatively. Like my brain was kind of ready to go create after meditating.
Yeah, I find that also. That's how Jonigan writes, Tommy Jonigan, past guest. Really? I think he just sits and like free writes like that and he'll fill a notebook and then go back through and see if there's anything in there.
I'd never tried it for comedy. I just sort of tried it as an exercise to be like, okay, and now time to go to writing class. But I guess there might be some gold in there. Who knows?
Well, the hard thing is your brain moves faster than your hand. That's right. What I have. Like when I'm writing like stand-up, my thoughts that's why my writing looks like shit. Because I'm starting to be like, and then this and then this, and my hand can't.
Yeah, it's just like a scratch.
Yeah, it just looks like shit.
We should hire typists like we're old authors and fill our thoughts out walking around a room.
Well, what would happen? You'd hire the guy or the woman and whoever it is. And then you'd just, as soon as I hired the person, I'd just be like, I got nothing. I'm sorry. Sorry you're here. I don't have anything.
What do you think? You think this is funny? And they're like, listen, I'm not here to chime in. You just do your thing.
But now where I'm going with what I'm like getting into with meditation or mindfulness and stuff is the idea of just when anxious, just sit and feel what it feels like to be anxious and just to be mindful, physically feel what anxiety feels like. And that really helps because instead of us identifying with the anxious thoughts, you're just feeling it as an experience of like, this is something I'm experiencing now in my consciousness of like, maybe my leg is twitching or my heart is beating faster. And when you break it down into those parts of just this little physical thing, it takes some of the teeth out of it. Instead of being like, oh my God, I'm dying, I'm panicking.
Yeah.
You can just kind of be like, I have a weird tingling in my arm and my heart's beating faster than it was earlier.
So it's kind of a know your enemy approach, like really just feel every part of this experience. And it's not as scary because you can sort of, didn't kill you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just kind of like, it's just a weird feeling. I just don't feel great. That's not such a big deal,
Can I ask how you meditate literally physically? Like, do you lie down? Do you go to a dark space? Do you just sit right here where you're sitting in your podcast chair? Like, what's your style?
So I got a chair that nobody sits in. It's just facing the wrong direction for some reason. It's not facing the TV. And
wall type of thing. Like,
yeah, well, it's not like a wall, but it's like, it's over here. Like if we have people over, it's nice because it feels like a circle, but it's just kind of facing the couch that I'm sitting in.
Got it.
And so I just I'll sit upright. I can't sit on the floor. That's insane to me when people put their ankles on their knee and shit.
Yeah.
So I just sit upright with feet on the floor. And I've been doing lately, I keep recommending it, highly recommend Sam Harris. You know that guy?
No.
He's terrific. He's got an app called Waking Up. It's the Waking Up app with Sam Harris. And it's got like a ton of shit on there. And he makes it free for anybody. It costs money, but he's like, if you can't afford it, I don't want that to be the reason, yada, yada. So he's like, you can email us, no questions asked. We'll supply it. I paid for it. Just full disclosure. I'm not a
good dude.
Yeah, I care about society, but I don't know how that made sense. But anyways, I got the app, and the app has like a ton of stuff on there. He has like hours and hours of theory where he's just talking to meditation teachers and stuff. And then there's all kinds of different, but he has like an introductory course, and it's 50 like 10-minute things. And for a while I was skipping that because that's my ego is like, I've been meditating for years. I don't need this guy's bullshit introduction. And then I just recently or like 3 weeks ago started doing that. And it's like really, really great. It's been the most helpful that I've done. So it's like 10 or 15 minutes at a time. It's guided.
On the day 7, I tried a guided one. My wife does Peloton, and we have like, they have guided ones. So I was like, I'll just try one. And honestly, as soon as you put on new agey music, I'm like already into it. I'm just like, okay, I'm half asleep and feeling pretty chill. So I think guided might be good for me. I think I could get down with that.
No, well, the guided is great. I use the Calm app too, which is also good. But the guided is great because they're so good at timing it where like I'm trying to meditate and like naturally all of a sudden I'm just thinking about a conversation I had 3 weeks ago, or I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat afterwards. And like just the right time, he'll be like, okay, and your thoughts have taken over and you're no longer whatever. And you're like, how the fuck? And he's like, that's okay. Just come back and let the thoughts disappear, yada, yada. So it's pretty great. And they manage to say exactly what is happening to you, and which allows you to be like, oh, I'm not crazy or losing my mind. I'm having the typical experience with meditation.
Yeah, I think a kind but stern guide could go a long way.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And now we're getting into these like in-depth concepts of like everything is just happening in consciousness, like the idea of no self and non-duality, like the idea of like I have a body and I have a mind. Well, then you're like, if you're not your body and you're not your mind, then who are you? And we're getting into these like trippy things.
Yeah. Well, that's, because we were doing meditation for our podcast, I was kind of, after meditating, I would write down my thoughts, and they would go I was self-effacing because we're comics, but they were very like early stoner thoughts about the interconnectedness of all of us and like the meaningless of self. I was getting there already, but they just, when you repeat them, they sound like philosophy 101 bullshit that you kind of can't help but feel self-conscious about it.
100%. Like I'm getting way into this stuff and consciousness and ego and all this stuff. And I went to the beach last week with Ari Shafir, and we were like in the water, and I was trying to like explain what Sam Harris, who's like a neuroscientist. I'm not smart. He's a neuroscientist and a meditation teacher, and I'm trying to like convey what he's saying, and Ari's literally just like, what? And Ari's like such a good guy and a thoughtful guy that he's like really trying. I can see him trying. Mm-hmm. And now I'm just like, I want to kill myself because I'm like, just the waves are us and we are. And he's like, I got nothing here.
Yeah, like existential telephone gets real bad real fast.
It does. Now, are you a mushroom guy or a weed guy or any of that stuff?
Not much anymore. I used to love mushrooms and had some really great groundbreaking experiences on them, but I haven't done it in a while. I mean, I don't want to be too downer, but I lost my sister like 8 years ago, and it was a really fucked up story. And my brain, I don't really trust my brain to go. I don't let it off the leash too much anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that way without the tragedy. So right, I get it. I've always thought that way with my anxiety and panic of like when I'm sober now from drugs and alcohol, but like even when I was and drugs, I just smoked pot here and there or whatever. And I would,
sure.
I liked painkillers when I had them, but I never had a painkiller guy, which was good.
That is good.
But even
Massachusetts.
Yeah. We love painkillers.
Yeah. It's the state bird.
But even then I was like, I'm like, the idea of like, I had so much anxiety and panic that I'm like, the idea of like being outside of my mind,
Right.
I'm just like, I better not do that.
That was my concern too. Cause like, I really liked shrooms. I wouldn't do them all the time, but I definitely would have a soul searching trips, and you kind of, it's just like a deep think. And then you kind of you're fascinated and in awe of the world again. You're like, this tree is beautiful in a way that I haven't realized since I was 4 years old. And that's just a nice, healthy kind of flushing of the brain. I enjoyed that. But yeah, now I don't know. I don't trust it as much anymore.
Yeah, I like that idea of the idea of mushrooms, and it's like the Bill Hicks documentary. They really like talk about his experiences with that. And Mike Kaplan's a good friend of mine, and he's like a Buddhist and he loves mushroom. And the way he describes them, like, that sounds amazing. But I've also heard and understand that you can get there without the mushrooms through meditation, which I feel like I've had like glimpses of with this Sam Harris stuff. So I'm trying to take that route, which seems like a much longer route to get there.
Yeah, but a much healthier, like deeper one, I think, if you can kind of tap into it. I mean, I remember one of the first times I ever did hot yoga. This sounds so cheesy, but towards the end of the class, we're like doing, I think it's called Shavasana, whatever, you just lay on your back at the end. And I think that's honestly just like a 5-minute meditation is what it is.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly just floating above my body and like looking at the class from up above. And then they pulled me out of it and I was like, holy shit, if I can tap into that every time, I will be here every day, core power.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, there's moments like that meditatively. And I've noticed, I don't know if it's my brain or my conscious or subconscious that like snaps me out of it. Cause I start being like, whoa, bro.
Totally.
And then you're like, hey, come on, man. What are you doing?
Well, that's why I thought the Shaolin monks are like, holy shit, this is cool. They're just like, lean in, calm down, lean in, and off you go. But we're not there, my friend.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to get there little by little.
That's cool, though. It's a noble struggle. Like I said, whenever I commit to this stuff, I can see the value and I tap in, but then I was like, nah, all right, on to the next thing. Like, I don't put it into daily practice.
Yeah, it's hard to, I don't know what the science is, but it's so hard to consistently do things that are really good for us. It feels like eating well, exercise, writing, all that shit. I don't know what that is. Do you have that struggle as well?
I am pretty neurotic, and like OCD was bad growing up. And so a way that's always chilled me out is just exercising, and like that. So if I don't exercise every single day, not even just for aesthetic vanity, just to sort of purge that anxiety, I definitely get wound up. I feel worse on days that I don't exercise. So I try to do something every day. So I guess that would be my most healthy, reoccurring practice for sure.
Yeah. See, I'm like better when I exercise, and I still manage to not do it. Although I've been running a bunch again. I used to be a big distance runner, but now I'm like getting old and it hurts more.
How far? I mean, distance running, I used to play soccer, and like, I remember the longest I've ever run was about 13 miles. And I was on an island off of Virginia. It was very rural. I ran at night, and that was one of the most Zen experiences I've ever had in my life. I was just kind of in the middle of nowhere, just running, and everything shut off in the way I think you desire when you're going for this higher level that you trying through meditation or whatever. It all just shut off, and I was just zoned out for an hour, and then I would snap to, and I was like, holy shit, that was 6 miles, 7 miles. Like, you had no idea.
Yeah, you can get that with running. I mean, now I'm running every other day. Like, I run like a 5K, 3.1 miles. And I do it every other day because I'm like, I just get sore. My feet hurt, my knee hurts. Yeah, and I just started doing MMA again, which I took 4 months off because of COVID. And I probably still should be taking it off, but we wear masks.
Yeah, my buddy Ben Roy is like a jiu-jitsu instructor, and he's back in, but like one-on-one, and they test and everything. But I'm still like, I don't know, man. You're in there pretty tight with those guys.
Yeah, same. It's like ridiculous. It's kind of a thing where we're just like, all right, so we're just pretty much trusting we're both okay here. But it feels good, but it is a different kind of soreness, and like kicking a heavy bag and getting punched in the face and then running the next day. It is a combo of like, what am I doing here? What is the benefit? What is the, the risk?
Right. Yeah. It's a lot more carefree when your joints are 23 years old. But I just hit 40. And so I go 3 miles running and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to feel that for 2 days straight.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm 38 now, and I feel like this is how I'm thinking. From what I understand, the way it goes is like now. Before in my 20s, I ran all day, 8-9 miles a day, and just was fine, untouched. And now I'm like, I wake up in the morning and I'm sore and stiff, and when I start running, I loosen up, and by the time I'm a mile in, I feel pretty good. And then later at night, I'm like, oh, I got a couple cricks. But I think you get to an age where you don't warm up. You get worse as you continue to run.
Well, I have to do all my exercise at least a couple hours into the day because I wake up, I get out of bed, and it's like old man winter. It's just popping ankles and knees, and like there's no way I'm like, cool, let's run right now at 6 a.m. My body has to like limber up, and then I can go do it. I really resent my friend Ben and my other friend Andrew, who are like my two comedy buddies, my best comedy buddies, because they were just nerdy kids. Ben played in like punk bands, but they never did any athletics. Meanwhile, I did sports from like 5 years old to 20 pretty hard, and my body is shot. And they're having these like 40-year-old athletic renaissances where they're like, wow, I can really move this thing around. I can do jujitsu. I can run for 20 miles. I'm like, fuck you guys. My knees are shot.
Well, it catches up eventually, I guess. And that's the thing that's funny, because in your mind, you're like, I'm going to eat well and stretch and meditate and run and do all this. And you're still like, you can last longer or whatever, maybe, but ultimately time will catch up. It's like the ultimate equalizer. There's nothing you can do to keep from aging.
No, really not. I think honestly, if we were to all wake up and stretch for 15 minutes, they'd be like, you could extend your life 8 years if you just stretched every morning. But we're all like, forget it. It doesn't matter.
Dude, I still feel that way. It's like another thing that is good for me. I finished running though, and I'm like, I stretch a little bit. I kind of fake it. I go through the motions, and then I'm just like, that was good enough. That's fine.
I always tell myself, count to 10 on each stretch, and then it's like 5 seconds. I was like, that's plenty. That's good. On to the next leg.
By the way, unrelated, Ben Roy did a guest spot. Last time I was at the Comedy Works in Denver. He did like a spot right before I went on and murdered so hard that I was like, this is an issue. This is a problem right now. I
do so many shows with him, and I hate following that dude. It's like, it's an impossible.
He smashed so hard, and then the only thing that saved me was he did a bit about how people from Boston suck, because I think he's from there originally.
He's from Maine. He's a New England kid.
Yeah, so then I went up after, and that was the only thing that saved me was I went, hey, I'm from Boston, and it killed so hard that because he had just trashed Boston so hard that it was enough for them to be like, okay, but it definitely, the level came down.
Oh yeah, same with me. My energy compared to Ben's, and also he's a showman. He's a frontman of a band, so if he's headlining, he'll be down in the audience, like in people's faces, touching their heads and crap. And then I go up there and I'm like, pretty sedate, gonna be about this pace. I really worked on the jokes. I hope you like them. And like, off we go. That's like one of the best pieces of comedy advice I ever got was. Because when you're young, your instinct is to keep the energy at that. It's sort of metaphorical, I guess, for life, but like to keep the energy to do what the person before you did. Right.
And Tony V, who's a comic in Boston, was the guy that was like, you got to take it all the way back down to zero. He's like, come out, don't even say anything for a little bit. Just kind of be up there going, hi, and like bring them down to flat to level, and then you can take them to wherever you want to go.
It's such good advice. I learned it somewhere along the way. I don't have an aha moment I can recall, but it must have been just eating shit, trying to follow Ben's energy 15 times and finally being like, this isn't working. Do your thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great metaphor for like people doing something. You're like, all right, that seems to work. I'll do what that guy is doing. And then you're like, oh, I'm a completely different person.
Oh, dude. I remember, you're so desperate when you're a younger comic. Like, I don't know if you know Ben Kronberg. He's from Denver. And
yeah.
He was the kind of first one of us to go anywhere and get on TV and stuff. And he would do musical. He had a guitar and he'd play like Nick Thune kind of one-liner things. And so like, I just tried that. I had like a 2-month period where I fucking tried to be a guitar act. Like, what are you doing? It's so far from what I do, but you just kind of desperately want to succeed.
Yeah, well, I think also when you're young, everything you see, you're like, maybe I could do that. Maybe I like that. That seems like something.
Right.
I mean, I was doing like poem. When I first started, there was George Carlin had like a poem about his hair from like 1971, and then I wrote a poem about the word fuck, and I was like, fuck is a word often heard, often slurred. It was like a pure Carlin, and it was about the word fuck. And I thought, I remember, I mean, I was like 17, but I remember being like, this is good. Like, this is big.
Eugene Merman used to put me on his show a lot. And then I'd come back from that with like, now I read emails. That's my thing. And like, I just have very absurd, literary premises and shit.
It's fun. I mean, that to me is, and I've talked about this in this podcast too, that's to me is the best part of aging, is sort of slowly finding out, as a comic, but also as a person, is like figuring out who you are, what works for you, what you like. And that to me is like the best part of being in my old upper 30s, or what do you call it? Late 30s?
Yeah. Well, your autumn years.
Yeah, it's all over.
No, I agree. And just in life as well, I think there's a lot of anxiety of, just wanting to fit in, doing the things that are cool. And at some point, you just don't care about cool anymore. Like, I have a son now. I've become a 1-year-old kid. And that's really quickly, you just kind of embrace dad, and your ego gets tossed away real quick. And I love that fact, because I think we spend a lot of time worrying about that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that, because just today, Sarah, my wife, and I'm 30. So you must have been 39-ish when you had your kid?
Let's see. I had just turned 38 when I had him.
Oh, okay. So I'm 38.
Yeah.
My wife is older. She's 42. And we were at a barbecue yesterday, and Rachel Feinstein, wonderful comic, was there with her new baby. And we were like, maybe we'll have a baby. And you're like, we're having that conversation, but like we've kind of been like, it's too late, and we're both comics and we don't have the money. But then you start to be like, that would be fun and exciting. And then how resistant were you to it? How much anxiety did you have? How much stress did you have towards it? Was it or natural and you just wanted it?
I wasn't resistant at all, because we tried. I'm one of the few people I know. I was like, we tried to have a baby, and then we had a baby. It wasn't like a mistake. It was sort of like, let's do it. We're ready. And I'm fortunate, like I was able to buy a house, and it's like, okay, let's do it. Let's be in this house and have a baby. But I also don't have a wife who's a comic as well. My wife is very old school. And, from the first day I met her, she was like, I just want to be a mom. Like, that's my career goal, is to be a mom. And at first I was like, kind of like, what? That's stupid. You got to have more goals than that. And she's like, no, but she just always wanted to do that. And that's so freeing on my end. And she's been very cool with like, you go conquer the world. I got the home front taken care of. So that allowed me to like not have the comedy fear of like, oh, my career is going to be ruined. So that freed me up big time, because unfortunately career and comedy is a lot of my thought.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the thing we've kind of thought of too, is that like, if we were to have a kid, is like, I make more money because I'm a man.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, I've been more fortunate in my career to make more money at this point, and like where I make most of my money, or used to, is on the road, because I'm like a road guy, like 40 weeks a year.
Yeah.
So to not be on the road, like, someone would have to have the baby at home, which would be her, and it's like one of those things of like, you might have to take huge sacrifices in your comedy career. And then I couldn't, because I would need to make money. And then it's like
more money now, like it'd be more urgent.
Yeah, exactly. So then it's like, then I'm away from the kid, and then we live in New York, which is so expensive. And then it's like public school and all. I go, did you go down that hole at all? Or again, I guess you didn't have to worry about any of that stuff too, or not any of that stuff.
I mean, I went down the hole of like, is this going to take away so much money and so much of my time that I can't just be like, I still live in the world. I had a TV show. So I'm like, what if I get another TV show and it needs to shoot for 6 months here? Do I just pack the family up? Do I go, like I was going to go, God, it's so sad. I was going to go to Edinburgh this year for the whole month. And even now that's an issue. It's like we worked it out. They were going to come for 2 weeks in the middle, but it affects every single decision. So I didn't realize that as much. And I don't think I played out the scenarios prior to having a baby. But now that I have a kid, it's like, I wouldn't care. I'd throw that shit all away real fast.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that's the thing too, is like, and I guess this can apply to a lot of different anxieties, but like the playing it out is good. It's good to be aware and plan, but also it's like you can't play out every situation in life. Some things you just have to decide and be like, we'll be fine when we get to that. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah. And truly, like, so this is an interesting story. We got pregnant, and then maybe halfway through, like maybe 24 weeks, Katie went in for like a routine checkup, and they were like, oh, this baby's coming like now. And we were like, what? And there had been some dilation, and I don't want to get too into details, but it was like, holy shit. And they sent us to like the neonatal unit, and we were there for 3 days. And long story short, they said a measurement that she had of like cervical length was indicative of the baby coming any second. And it scared the shit out of us because that would have been very, very premature. And the next half of the pregnancy was kind of like my wife on bed rest and just every day being like, that's one more day of development and bacon in the oven. Good job, babe. And we held on to full term by 1 day, and the kid came out with no problems at all. But the back half of the pregnancy was so harrowing and anxiety inducing that the baby was born healthy. And it's like, oh, I don't care about anything else anymore. Like all the sort of vague comedy concerns and shit were out the window. It's amazing how real life takes over in a heartbeat. And you're like, okay, I don't have time for my vain fake anxieties. There's a lot of real ones right now.
Yeah. Part of me has that feeling is like, oh, I might be much less anxious if I had a kid, because it makes everything that, like you said, like the things that really matter more evident. And like I have nieces and nephews, and I'll spend time with them, and 2 of them are like older now, but like the little ones, nothing brings me more in the moment than hanging out with a small child, like a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. Like the idea of like making them laugh and being connected to, listening to them and talking to them really brings you into the moment. And it's hard to be thinking about retweets when you're talking to a small child, Yeah,
I think that's what we're kind of, I mean, that's, more than I, but I feel like in the moment, the state of unthinking is what all of this stuff is searching for. Meditation and enlightenment and all of that is the in the moment, unthinking, surrendering of self. And kids do that all the time for you in a way that you don't even realize. But next thing you know, you're just like, oh, I haven't thought about one comedy thing in an hour. I've just been playing trucks with my little dude.
Right. Yeah, that sounds glorious to me. But this to me, it sounds crazy. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to not have kids, and it's hard to like.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't want to convince you not to have kids when you already have a kid. But to me,
I'm hearing you out.
To me, the biggest deterrent, and it sounds funny, but I'm also like kind of serious, from talking to my friend with kids, is having to spend time with the parents of your kids' friends.
Fuck, dude. Yeah. I was kind of had a bit before life stopped when I was limping towards useful about there's no more of a, like, nobody gives less of a fuck than a dad of a 1-year-old at another 1-year-old's birthday party. Like I'll wear sweatpants. I'll drink at 11 a.m. I won't even make small talk. Like I was at some party and someone mentioned Adam was a comic, and I just like grunted. I was like, I don't like you people. This is all circumstantial. I won't see you again ever. I bet we don't make birthday party number 2 for this kid. So no way. I'm not trying at all.
Yeah, my buddy, that I went to high school with, he's like my best friend, and he's like a kind of a relatively conservative guy, not politically, but just a conservative fella, and like a small town Massachusetts guy, and he's a merchant marine, so he lives in Seattle, and he's got little kids, and he's in like a very hipster neighborhood, and he's wearing his Carhartt and dad
Right.
jeans, and he's going to whatever the group picnic, and it's, fellas in skinny jeans and fedoras talking about whatever thing. And he's like, I don't know what the fuck these people are even talking about.
I remember I saw a guy in a Wilco t-shirt and I was like, that's cool enough. Like, I'll go over, I'll talk to Wilco for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's something I guess you got to make the best of it. But your kids aren't making friends based on other kids' parents,
No, not at all. And I see it more with my sister who has 3 kids who are older. Our kid's 1.5, and we're kind of in quarantine. So, we're not like going out seeking play dates these days. He's still at the age where he's pretty cool with just mom and dad.
Right.
But it was going pretty hard and heavy already with birthday parties and shit with a 1-year-old before everything kind of shut down.
Right. And how are you guys handling the whole thing with the 1-year-old? No real breaks, right?
No breaks at all. None whatsoever. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but that's like been the silver lining, because I'd be on the road, and I average about 2 weekends a month, which is doable. Sometimes 3, sometimes 4. And I would be missing a lot of shit. But instead it's like, I haven't missed a good night at nap time in 90 days. Like, I'm there for every single one. So the kids we're pretty bonded.
Right. That's great. So you're loving it. I should have a kid is what you're saying.
I am loving it. And now's the time. You're going to hunker down and nest anyway. So just do it. Do it right now. And,
this moment.
And you'll be doing society a favor by not going out and just being with your kid.
I'm like, Sarah, get over here. Let's get that IUD out of you.
Podcast over. Another one of those short episodes.
Yeah, and then we're just banging.
Surprise ending.
No, it's like, the weird thing, like the deeper thing too for me, and this is like more like serious issue, is that I realize that, like, and I'm afraid my family's going to listen, but like in my family, everybody that has a kid, the marriage ends up getting very stressed and very tense. And you talk to people and they're like, having a kid, it's a lot of work. It's this. And with kids, we don't even get to, and there's a lot of sort of projection towards me of like, well, you get to go to Europe. You're on the road with these families. Meanwhile, they don't understand that I'm working. That's my job, that I gambled any kind of job security whatsoever to be. This is my own bitterness coming out. But
dude, the anxiety that we've both had over the past 15 years on this long shot of a career can definitely makes up for the perceived freedom we have in what we do.
Exactly. I mean, like, I just went on the rant on my other podcast about this, where I was talking, understanding the humor behind it, being like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm having a great time. And people are like, I'm glad you're having fun. I lost my job. And I'm like,
right.
Yeah, I also lost my job. I'm making light of the fact it's obviously not the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Right, of course.
And you're like, people are like, well, I got this job now. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, when you were working for 15 years, I had 4 roommates and my electricity was shut off. It's like, okay, I'm like, this is a difficult road to get to this point where I have some money and still not a rich person. Right.
And that pot is going away fast as we don't tour, and the public gathering biz is very up in the air. Like, it's not a real happy time for us. I'm trying to bang out scripts and shit, but those are even longer shots.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh, well, we have our Patreon, and I'm like, I got sound exchange money here and there.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, yeah, I'm trying to piece together a living for me and my wife. But anyways, my point was that, like, my family, being around a lot, I have a big family, and a lot of them, like, when they had kids, the marriage got tougher and money got tighter and they got to do less things. And so for me, in a lot of ways, the way I've grown up is perceiving it as like, you don't have kids. Life gets shitty when you have kids.
Right.
Which is, then I talk to people outside of my family, and they're like, it's the most glorious thing I've ever experienced in my life. Nothing else matters. Everything else is a joke compared to raising a kid. But I never really heard that much growing up.
For sure. I understand what you're saying, because it is the death of your freedom. And like the cool thing, like, I used to have, Southwest, that's my airline. And I was such a baller. I had companion status on that shit.
Nice.
So you could just hit +1 and you got a free ticket on any flight. And so prior to the kid, I'd bring my wife on like every road trip if she was up for it, or as a city she wanted to go to. And it was so much more fun to tour around the country with my wife, and I'd go work at night and then we'd go get up and tour the city. It was a blast. And that's just gone. And so like we really enjoyed traveling together. It was a nice part of our relationship. That's no longer a thing.
Right.
But you just sort of, you get the benefits elsewhere of this cool little dude you both are head over heels for. And in terms of like enlightenment and the surrendering of self we were talking about, I don't believe that this is absolutely necessary, but I do think there's an interesting thing that happens when you stop thinking about yourself as number one for the first time ever. I think you pretend that your wife, you put her before you, but ultimately it's like you're still in your head. But 100% sincerely, this kid I think about him before me. And It's just kind of biological and evolutionary. And I think that's almost like a new way of thinking. I've had 40 years on the planet of thinking this way and got that all figured out. And now all of a sudden I'm thinking a different way fundamentally. And that's sort of scary and exciting and probably going to lead to all sorts of growth and thought and all that shit.
Yeah. See, that sounds wonderful and magical, but you got to hang out with those other assholes. And
and I don't get to try any of these new restaurants anymore.
Right. No, it does. I mean, it really does sound appealing. And I wish that I had grown up hearing more of that. And then there's also the fear of like, what if my kid gets bullied and I have to go, murder a bunch of people?
Or what if my kid has this developmental disability or this happens, or, every time my kid almost breaks his neck walking down the stairs every day. And you're like, holy Jesus, you just got to let them fall a little bit. So there's a whole new set of anxieties that are through the roof.
Yeah, which is all that is just anxiety. Like that's what my therapist would say, which is he says in such a great way of like, it's just anxiety. And you're like, right, shit. I thought are you a therapy guy?
Yes, I've done plenty of therapy and pretty intense therapy with regard to my sister and all that. I've gone through some serious shit therapy. So yes, I'm a big proponent of many different types of therapy.
Yeah, my therapist is always good. I always think I'm going to really trick him here. I'm going to hit him with this. And he's going to be like, I don't even know what to, and then he'll just be like, yeah, it's anxiety. What else? And you're like, shit. All right. Fuck. I thought I really had something interesting here.
Are you like a weekly therapy with your guy or?
Yeah. So I went during COVID times. I went to every other week.
On Zoom and all that.
Yeah. We just do it over the phone, but he just lost his son like a couple of weeks ago, which was so he hasn't been working. Yeah, it's rough. So he hasn't been working, but I've been going for years. I love it. But so can we talk about your sister a little bit?
Yeah, man.
Is that all right?
I have an open book on that for sure.
You wrote a book about it, right?
I did. Yeah, I did. I wrote a book called Tragedy Plus Time. Long story short, she killed herself 8 years ago. And she was like my best friend and just a very, very funny girl. And we were comedy collaborators from, 4 years old on. Just my partner in riffing, I guess. And I like found her, and it's a very fucked up scenario, and it really fucked me up. And so I went to a lot of therapy to deal with that, which was later diagnosed as like PTSD and all this memory loss stuff. So I did this type of therapy called EMDR.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's like eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's hard to say. But basically it's for people with PTSD. And when you've got these like traumatic memories that are and triggering flashbacks and nightmares and shit, it's kind of dealing with that. And it's I can describe it for you. It's very sci-fi sounding, but you hold these two little like pulsars in your hand and they sort of tick-tock back and forth, and you close your eyes and your eyes instinctually follow that motion, kind of mirroring REM, like what we do when we sleep. And then while you're doing that, you just tell the therapist about the traumatic memory again and again and again in like extreme detail. She wants you to tell her everything. And the goal of that is just kind of like normalizing it and like taking away the severity of it. And over time, it's sort of the memory just becomes less barbed through that process. But it's really heavy and hard. And you have to think of a happy place in your brain when it gets too overwhelming to like retreat back to. And it was a whole ordeal, but it was fascinating from a brain perspective.
Yeah. So that's sort of like, I mean, on a much grander scale, like not too dissimilar from what I was talking about earlier, which just like the physically feeling what anxiety feels like. That's what it, I mean, again, not to like equate my doing an hour-long podcast anxiety with what you're talking about, but the exercise of like, let me feel it and kind of approach it from a different way neurologically.
And like living in it and taking away its teeth, I believe you said. Like, yeah, I think that approach is the same. And she had some metaphor. Therapists love metaphors for the brain, and that's their thing. They can't get enough of them. And her metaphor was that the brain was a filing cabinet. And the memory of finding my sister had become this errant file, and it was like popping up at inappropriate times. So the goal of this was like to file it away in an orderly fashion. And it's there for me to pull up when I want to pull it up. Because that was a weird thing, is like I wanted to have the memory still. I was like, I don't want you to erase my brain. Like for some reason I want this. I don't want it going away. And she's like, it's not going away. I'm just going to help you control it. And I was like, all right, well, that sounds fucking great.
Right. And so how long did you do that for? I apologize for the sirens, if you can hear the sirens.
I can't hear the sirens. It's just it'll be a good metaphor for the listener with the headphones.
I was thinking that. So how long after her passing did you start that process, and how long did you do it for?
It's honestly a blur, a lot of it. But I've had to like piece the narrative because of the book. I think I started the therapy maybe 6-8 months after her death, because shit was just getting really, really bad for me. And I kind of spun out in Grand Rapids at Dr. Grins.
That's a good place to spin out.
I spun out pretty fucking hard and realized like I'm not right, like in the head at all. I need help. And so then the therapy itself was probably maybe 10, 12 sessions. I can't even remember. But at some point I just kind of told her, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I've got it. I don't want to do this anymore. And she's like, then you're done. And she's been there for me ever since. Like, that's her specialty. So she's kind of busy and an expert, but I'll call her every 6 months. And I'm like, having a rough one. Can I come in? And I just go in and we just chat. We don't do the EMDR. We just talk about everything. But, it also really helped because I had been going to do traditional therapy right in the wake of this, and none of that was working. And all those therapists were very like pitying of me and just really going out of their way to show their empathy. And, you know, like it just bothered me. I didn't want pity. And then this woman, she wasn't tough love, but you looked at her caseload and it's like soldiers. And she told me she had like, you know, African children of war and shit, like people have been through way worse than I've been through. So her attitude was very like, it's fucking terrible. Let's get after it. Let's get to work, you know?
Right. Yeah. See, I'm like, it's interesting to me because I'm one of those people that I always think like so many people hear stuff like that, stories like yours or of African children or veterans or whatever it is, and think like, how do you recover from that? I cannot imagine recovering from that. Sarah and I are watching, I don't know if you've watched it, HBO, I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Yeah. My wife and I are watching that too.
It's fantastic. And they show like this couple, if you're not watching it, you should watch. It's fantastic. Or unless you're easily, I shouldn't say easily, unless you're triggered by that kind of trauma. But so this guy was breaking into people's houses and raping the woman and tying them both up and all this crazy stuff. And there's that one couple that's really sweet. And I'm like, they stayed together and they seem like, okay.
Yeah, that poor man. And he's just like, everyone's like, why didn't you do anything? He's like, because I was tied up with a gun to my head. But like, yeah, I know that couple's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. So they're like heartbreaking. And I'm like, how do you recover from that? So it's so fascinating, but we were watching and eventually that guy it's a big news story, but that guy was caught and I felt strangely like, okay, I understand, like there must be some sort of relief instead of just this mysterious guy that came in and fucked up your life and disappeared. Now they're caught and you're like, this is his name, this is who he is.
Yeah.
I can imagine some relief. Is there, I think my question changed in the process of talking about this, but is there a moment for you, or is it just a process of just like, all right, I feel a sense of relief, not that you're 100% healed or cured or if it's ever like that, but.
No, I mean, honestly, no. Like, that's what I think a lot of people get wrong about loss that tragic is like, they want to get to this point where it's like, and then I was healed or whatever. Right. And you're like, it just doesn't happen. I'm healed in the term, and like, it's not this visceral flashbacks, nightmares. Like, I'm used to the loss now, but the metaphor of like, it feels like you lost a limb. You're always aware of that, like limb being missing.
Right.
And so I've talked about it on stage, and I just say, it's all very Russian. It's just like life. Oh, you're just now learning that life is shit. Like, life is shit. And it's just kind of an acceptance of that fact it helps to be a comic and have a dark ass sense of humor anyway. And being like, this is the place where we operate from. It's like, yeah, man, it's terrible. Let's laugh at it. So it's kind of that. Right.
And so the physical part of what is it?
EMDR.
EMDR.
Yeah.
Does the electricity thing, like, does it hurt, or is it just like?
No, it's literally, it's not electricity. It's just like vibrating things in your hand, like tick tock, and you can just feel them pulsing back and forth, just as a way to help your eyes move back and forth. You're tricking your brain into thinking you're asleep while you're awake.
Interesting. Yeah, I just remember where I heard about it. I was listening to Jim Carrey on Mark Maron, and they both said they have done it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know what they didn't get into detail, and I don't know what their trauma or whatever was.
Friends with Maron as well, and I wonder with his current trauma it could be a little bit helpful. I've also had people, because I wrote like an article about it, and I've become this sort of big proponent of it. And I've had people come up to me and say, I tried EMDR and it was the worst thing ever, because you're just like reliving your trauma again and again and again. But like anything, it's like the quality of the shrink. I'm like, I'm sorry that didn't work for you. My lady was awesome. Maybe try it again with somebody else. But it's also unique to people. It worked really well for me because I think I was looking for it pretty hard.
Yeah, sometimes that helps if you're in a state of desperation, it feels like, and you're like, whatever you tell me, I'll do. I'm ready to have that work for me.
And it helped with the PTSD part. But just, the emotional sense of loss is always there. My dog's whining. Hey, no. But you get over it a little bit. It gets a little bit better through time. And my little sister was so fucking funny and such a big fan of comedy and my comedy, and that I just know she wouldn't want me moping my way through the rest of my life. So I think it's kind of like, to be very reductive, it's like, would you rather laugh or would you rather cry? Like, I've done both a lot. I really prefer laughing. I'm going to try as hard as I can to do that from here on out. Right.
God, that's tough. And I imagine that like comes back in with every, what do you call it? Milestone in your life, with the baby, the TV show, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I run this comedy festival in Denver, and I remember kind of brainstorming it with her before it even started. Now would have been year 8 this year. And she was like, oh man, if that ever gets off the ground, like, you should let me drive some of those comics around. I'll volunteer. And that's like, we've come so far past then. Like, now people we both loved are my dear friends, and she would be geeking out about a lot of this stuff.
Right. And then, so the book that you wrote, and I know you want to plug an album as well, but the book I found out about, I don't know if I ever messaged you or if we talked about this, but I didn't know you'd read a book, but I was at that bookstore in downtown Denver that I love, and I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, the Tattered Cover.
Yes.
Yeah, great bookstore.
Yeah, I love it. And I was sitting, in fact, I bought my favorite book all time there, Say Nothing, by some Irish guy. I forget his name.
I read that about the Troubles.
Yeah, it's like my favorite book.
I just read that in quarantine. It's so good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I was sitting there, and bookstores make me, think and all yada yada yada. I'm such a dum dum. I wish I could just really. They make me think.
Yeah, dog.
But they make me reflective, whatever. But I was sitting on like a little couch reading, and sometimes I'll read and I'll stop and kind of think about what I was reading, what I just read, and I was just staring, and then I'm like, I think, is your picture on the cover?
Yeah, the picture, it's a picture, like a family portrait of me and my two sisters from when we were kids.
Yeah, I was sitting there and just kind of staring at it because it was facing or faced, whatever the term is. And then I was looking at the name and I was like, Adam? And I just got up and picked it up, and it was like an autographed copy. That's your hometown.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was looking at it, and at the time I was like, I gotta check this out. I gotta read this. And full disclosure, I have not, because I was reading this other book, and I always have like 3 or 4 books going at a time.
Yeah.
But it was funny because I was just, kind of like glazed over, just staring. And then I had realized I was looking at your book.
I love it. That's the way to buy my book in like the best indie bookstore in Denver, just staring at you. I love that.
So what was that process like? Was that a traumatic process or the opposite of traumatic?
It was cathartic because I didn't like write the book because I was like, I've got it. I figured out my thoughts on this and it's time to put them to page. I did a lot of my thinking in the writing. Right. So I would be like, sometimes I'd just be like sobbing writing, which is when it's good. But that would be me having that realization in real time. So it really helped me a lot to write it because I was able to determine my thoughts rather than gather thoughts I had had previously. It was very much in real time. So I loved it because it helped me deal with a lot of that. And I grew up wanting to be a writer, and, so it's like every morning I'd have my coffee, walk the dogs, and then sit down and write for a couple hours. It felt very genteel. It was a nice Hemingway experience.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's how I started quarantine. I was like, I'm going to write a memoir in quarantine. Like, you always have like these big ideas. And I started writing, and I told this story again on my other podcast, but I was like, I got all these stories and anxiety and alcoholism and herpes and heartbreak. And I started writing all of them. And then I told my agent about it. And then he hooked me up like a literary agent. And I was like, I'll write a proposal or a, what do you call it? A summary or some.
Yeah. Well, book proposal is what is kind of the norm.
Yeah. So I wrote I sent her like 28 pages, and like, I'm like, this is good, man. And then like a real comic, just the first criticism. She's like, it's good. You're a good writer. It's a little much all at once. You got to kind of figure it out. And just within 5 seconds, I was like, nope, not doing it. Fuck it. I was just like, I'll go back to stand up. This is dumb. Yeah. Did you have that process or experience at all with it? Like, did you ever have the feeling of like, I can't do this. Who am I? What am I?
Well, the first 5 years, I started comedy, right? And I got a job working at the Alt Weekly in Denver right at the same time, like the Village Voice of Denver, the Westward. And I was a staff writer for them, like a journalist for 5 years. So I wrote, and I knew how to like have a deadline and get to it. So if I hadn't had that experience, I don't think it would have been a lot more daunting. But when I got to write the book, I was like, I'm going back to what I know. I love writing. I'm good at writing, and I like doing it. So I got the same shit from my editor or my lit agent about the book proposal, but it wasn't my first time being edited really hard.
Right.
So I'm glad that I had that experience because I know exactly what you're talking about, and our egos are pretty fragile. And I would have been like, fuck you. This is the most important story of my life. You don't know if it's right or not. I would have gone to bat for something that didn't need to go to bat because it was better the way he proposed it. Yeah.
See, I guess that's a benefit is coming from a writing experience and a place where you've been writing with an editor. I'm like, I might exclusively stand-up comedy. So the idea
you're your own boss the whole time, and like no one's really, besides a helpful tag here and there, no one's telling you do it this way or I'm not letting you on stage. Yeah, in comedy, it's either like that's great or that's been done. No one's ever like that was garbage. You're not even close, dude. Like, so answering to somebody was just foreign to me. And someday maybe I'll try to take another crack at it. And I think you should, man. I would read your book. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. You should. Don't be daunted by that first sort of I'm sure meant to be helpful couple of notes.
No, and like I think it was probably too, like, again, with time, she was like being really sweet, but it was just like, you son of a bitch. Like, I'm like, what the hell do you know about writing?
Dude, when I first started writing for that paper, I was 24 and, thinking I'm Jack Kerouac. And this editor who started it was this woman who started the paper in the 70s. She's this badass. She drinks hard, wears cowboy boots. She's like a figure in Denver. And I'd go in with my little 200-word blurb, and she'd have changes. And I'd like go in and try to fight her on every change of why it couldn't be changed. And I remember at one point she just looked at me and she goes, "Is this the hill you want to die on?" And I was like, fuck. And after that, I kind of learned, let the editor do their thing. They're editors for a reason.
Yeah, that's helpful. By the way, I just had a friend give me you mentioned Kerouac, a first edition Dharma Bums.
Dude.
And it's pretty killer.
That's great. Dharma Bums is for the real Kerouac heads. Like On the Road's great, but I like Dharma Bums is much better.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I read it. We got to start to wrap up here, but sure. I had this. This is another thing I kind of alluded to earlier about getting older. Is like I'm becoming who I wanted to be. Like in my early 20s, I was like a drunk comic and like, I'm reading Kerouac, man. And none of it was getting through. I didn't even like reading. I couldn't focus. So I kind of like half-ass read Dharma Bums and On the Road and had no attention span. And I was just a boost. Now I'm like quietly reading and like taking it in. I'm like, this book's amazing. Like, I love it.
That's great, man. No matter when you're getting it, it's good stuff to get.
Yeah, totally. And it's super cool because it's a first edition. And
that's a nice gift.
Yeah, it's like $3.95 in the cover. And it's like, here's some other titles. And they're all $1.95. And it has like a cool smell. And
hell yeah, I love that shit.
It's a really fun experience. But yeah, I love that book. But well, we got to kind of wrap it up. But thanks so much, man. I hope this is enjoyable for you.
Oh, yeah, dude. Nice talking with you. I thanks for having me on. Yeah,
of course. And let's plug the album, which comes out what day? I don't even know
August 3rd. August 3rd. New Comedy Central record. What's it called? Semblance of Normalcy.
Nice. Where'd you record it?
I recorded it at Helium in Portland a while back, but it was just, not too precious with it. It's just like, here's a night. I love this night of comedy. Hope you enjoy these jokes type of thing.
I love that. I like albums. The idea of it just being a show. Here's a show. It's not like this one was recorded here and this was recorded here. We put it all together. I like the idea of like, here's a comedy show straight through.
I literally didn't take not even one bit from another show. It's like this. It was this evening's show.
Oh, that's perfect. I did that with my Comedy Central record, and I liked the idea of doing that, but this one we had to because they fucked up the Friday night sound. So they're like, we only have one show. And I was like, great. And it ended up being the best show.
Well, lucky you.
Yeah, but awesome. So and I'll do a proper intro up top and plug that and the book. But
sweet, man. Oh, if you don't mind plugging, our podcast is The Grawlix Saves the World. It's me and Ben Roy, we talked about earlier, and Andrew Orbital trying to better the world around us by bettering ourselves.
That's great. And you guys are all still working together. Never a big breakup or anything. You guys it works.
It's like we're brothers at this point. It's like we hate that we love each other, but we love each other.
That's great. I mean, it's so hard to maintain anything for that long.
Yeah, we're having fun still. So that's a good sign.
That's great. Beautiful. All right. I'll plug all this at the beats. People have already heard about this retroactively. I haven't recorded it, but they will have heard about it. So,
well, thank you everyone for already knowing all this stuff. Appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Joe, good talking to you.
You too.
Mindful Metal Jacket is hosted by comedian Joe List. Produced by Joe List. Edited by Matt Kleinschmidt. Executive producers Robert Kelly and Matt Kleinschmidt for the Laugh Button Podcasts.